Alrighty. It's been a little while. I've been busy with a lot of personal life stuff. It's been kind of difficult. But I do have some really cool stuff in the pipeline. Definitely, I'm going to be getting a Worlds deck list review done where we can look at the metagame at Worlds and the decks. Part of it, the reason I was waiting for a while is I wanted to wait because I knew KP would put a video out. He has a great conversation talking about his deck building process and why he built the decks the way that he did. But I wanted to make sure that I gave people a week's notice to get excited about the Summer Cup. So if you're not familiar, next weekend in Wonderland Games, there is the Australian Summer Cup. And it's going to be a bunch of different events. Saturday's got like a standard tourney. Sunday has a team seal. Those are all super exciting. Those will be great. But I want to put people's attention on an event that I think people are maybe less excited for than they could be. So on Friday, which is day one of the event, there is first five. I'm actually going to be honest. I think this is going to be the more popular of the events, but it's not the one I'm going to be entering in. I am really excited for L3. And I'm so excited and so wanting to play this format with people that I did something I haven't done since like a tier list video from, I think I haven't done this since like Opus 21. I made a PowerPoint. So let's talk a little bit about L3 and Hidden Legends, why I'm going to play it, and why I think it'll be awesome. So if you're not familiar, L3 is a alternate format to Standard Constructed that rotates. I think of it more like a Magic the Gathering or Pokemon, where only the last three sets are legal. Historically, it's really only been played in Japan. They've tried a couple times. They were considering having like L3 Materia Crystal Cups in 2020 before they were canceled due to COVID. The mats for those were still printed and still exist and are awesome. But really, this is a format that only is played in Japan. But previously, I was a bit of a naysayer on the format. I wasn't super excited, but I think right now the format's in a really cool and interesting place. And I think that it actually solves a lot of problems. And I think that like a lot of locals might want to consider playing this over even Standard Constructed for a little bit. So why play L3? No Refia. I have the survey results. You guys are not a fan of Refia at all. It's the second most hated deck in the format. Refia was printed in Opus 19. Four Color Warrior of Light, Opus 19. All of these are not legal in the format. No Chaos. This was the most... Spoilers for the other video that's coming up. People do not like playing against Chaos, obviously. If you're playing Chaos in this, you're playing ethically sourced Chaos. You can play the Opus 23 Chaos, but there are no other Chaoses for special fodder. There is no Gigawall. Gigawall was Opus 21. No Lastwell for Knights. All of these like really crazy, obnoxious, powerful synergies. No Leo to abuse with Tidus. They're all gone. No Amaterasu. When you do stuff, you're guaranteeing it's going to resolve. And lastly, the decks are dirt cheap. I think that the most expensive stuff in L3 is like Clive, but there's a good chance you already own a set of Clive. Like, let's be honest, if you're like playing for Standard. And if you're not playing Clive, there's actually still a lot of really powerful decks you can play. You just probably don't want to play Fire or Ice. So you want to play, where do you start? First of all, I'm going to say it's a lower power format. You're going to have some similar bombs, cards like Chaos and Witch of the Fens and X and Mill are huge and powerful just as they would be otherwise. But a lot of the engines and supporting cast are so much weaker that it's going to play very differently. So let's start with backups, because standard unit backups are a lot more important. There's no engines. The only backup that searches a backup that I can think of off the top of my head is Emina in Ice, which is one of the reasons I think Ice is going to be one of the strongest archetypes. I'm going to go through all the archetypes that I think are playable. I might even do a little bit of a jump through one more time, because I really have gone through. I think that like L3 is a brewer's paradise right now. So some misconceptions. L3 is not just worse standard. It plays very differently. Again, like I said, some of those power cards are still around, but because the supporting cast is so different, you know, last set they were playing Gigawall to get Lilith out of the deck, for instance, and not, you know, I'm going to play this other really powerful card. You know, they weren't using it for like Gilgamesh BE, right? Like, just getting a really strong forward that searches another, a copy of itself was actually good enough. Um, for instance, FF8 stuff was played like Ice Lightning with the Squall because the Squall actually was better than just about anything else you could do for FF8, which is not the case in Standard Constructed. Usually it was played like Mono Lightning or as part of a shell with like Don Corneo, for instance, right? Like you just didn't bother with the Ice Squall because why you didn't need to. L3 is older than L6. L6 was created because during COVID they were worried that multiple sets were going to completely skip L3, which ended up actually happening. I think like Opus 11, 12, and 13 were, I guess, technically there was some in-person play in Opus 15, but like it really didn't pick up until like 16 was when we first started having tournaments again. But like, I think Opus like 10, 11, and 12 just straight up would have missed L3, this like rotating format concept that they like want to do, but they aren't willing to push because people aren't super excited by it. And lastly, this format does see play in some experimentation. If you go on the Square Enix YouTube, you can watch the L3 Championship last year, and it's fantastic. It's really interesting. I think my biggest complaint is that like Lufenian was still legal, so like it was like the two best decks were Ice Lightning, FF13, Aggro Discard, and Gigawall, which was not my favorite format to watch just because of how prominent it makes stuff like Discard. But like, there were some really interesting games, and again, like you see these cool payoffs for cards that just aren't quite up to par for Standard, that are going to be so much stronger in this L3 format. So I want to talk a little bit about all of the standard unit backup cycles that are in L3. I think that like any deck, these are going to be the backbone of your deck in much the way that like a basic land might in Magic. Crystal Gem backups, these have been reprinted into every L3 intentionally. It's why they keep getting reprinted every 3 sets. I wish they would just make these standard as always being legal, but they don't want to do that. They just want to like reprint them instead. My wife is opening packs over there. She's all excited about something. That one. But yeah, so these are in the format. If you're playing the crystal deck, you're going to play them. There are really strong crystal payoffs in the format as well. So, but that's the main reason to play these. We have what I call the slow draw backups from Opus 24. These are the ones that are 3 costs and draw an entry. And if you have 4 or more of the same type, you do 7k. And I'll be honest, even without that second text, these cards are good enough to see play in the format. Luso LB is obviously still around. And even in 2-color decks, the ability to tap any backup, pitch a card of the right color, and develop a backup of the correct color is really strong. I really like these backups in just about every deck that I've been building. These are the backups that I call the crack backups, which is that if you play a forward, you can crack them to have an effect. I think that the fire one, the water one, the wind one are definitely the best of these. But the nice thing is you don't have to have you don't have to do anything other than just put the backup in the break zone. So they have a lot of utility. The lightning one's really good as well. Yeah, like they're all just really solid. There's what I call the slow synergy backups. These are most of them are cost 2, but if you have 5, if it's your 5th backup, then you get like a big bonus effect for the element that you're in. But they always do something, and then if it's exactly your 5th backup, you get a bonus. The best of them by far is this red mage, just because it's a 3C backup that makes your opponent discard. There's what I call the discard utility backups, where they all have an effect utility, and then a second ability that cost 1, discarding a card of their element, and then you get a different effect. These are all pretty interesting. I think that like the ice and the fire ones are probably the best. Wind is really bad in this cycle. I remember the earth one's really solid. The ice one's really solid. Like it's definitely like an interesting set of summons, or not summons of backups. So I'm thinking of the summoner backup and how it interacts with summons, but they're interesting. They all do different things, and again, every element has access to them. And then there's the scry backup. So these are evokers, 1-cost backups that allow you to look at the top of your deck, and then you can put it on the bottom if you want. In a slower metagame, these actually might be really, really good. They haven't had any impact on Standard because generally people would rather play the Opus 18 cycle ones if you want to play a one cost backup like this, because they have utility, and scrying in this game is a lot weaker than in other card games because you might lose the card you're scrying when you play these. But I think that especially for mono decks, you could definitely consider playing some number of these. For non-standard unit backups, what are good? I pulled up a selection of them. I'm just going to kind of go through them really quickly. Umaro is a 2 CP blank backup that doubles as a removal spell if you need one. Torgal is meta defining in this. I think that dominants are probably one of the best archetypes and one of the most interesting sets of cards you can play in the format. Mid is recovery. There's very little of it in this set, in this format right now. Strago, Leviathan is still legal in L3, so you can do a Strago Leviathan package, and the game should be slow enough that you can resolve this guy multiple times and get some card advantage off of it. Garland, just a good way of like getting a forward out of the way to do lethal. Not a ton of Knight synergy either, so losing the name isn't a problem. Moro, another option for those Evoker backups in Fire if you want. Amo, there's a lot of cards that have synergy with your opponent having no cards in hand or low cards in hand. Amo can guarantee that happens. Also can be great to ensure that your plays resolve through any summons your opponent might have. Sarah is a 3 CP backup that makes your opponent discard a card. She is the 4th copy of that red mage from earlier. It's still going to be good enough to actually be worth considering playing. She's also searchable off of Snow from LB. Journey, this card is crazy. Protects your forwards of low cost and makes them bigger. Venat, it's a summon cancel, and I think that the Venat light card is potentially actually worth considering in this format. Tyro, there is no recovery in this format. I can't stress that enough. There's no Kusith. It's like Noctis or bust. Tyro being able to get any card back could potentially be useful, and that action ability could be really solid in the lower power format. Luso, this is ramp in a way that we don't have access to otherwise in the format, and a little bit of monster hate, can't complain about it. I don't think the monsters in this format are too crazy. Alice, it's a search spell. This can get you other backups and get you forwards. It helps make sure that your game plans happen more often. Mog, a cheap backup with the ability to tag into an FF13 forward, and FF13 is potentially a really interesting archetype you could play, thanks to cards like the Hope, the Null, the Sarah, and the Caius from Opus 23. And Orin, back attack on a backup that protects your forwards is really cool in a format that there just aren't better options for a lot of things. Emina, obviously an insanely strong card. Wall is kind of the best equivalent to Emina in Wind. Shinryu Celestia, 4,000 power is a lot, and there's a lot of reasons to want to be playing Mono Ice. Balo, again, recovery. There's not a lot of it. Drace, search, really good. Rigdia, Lightning has a lot of recovery. These are good utility cards. Deck ideas. These are things that I've kind of just picked out. I don't think this is exhaustive by any means, but I want to talk about like some decks that you might expect to see. I think the best deck and the most expected one to see is going to be the Mono Ice deck. This is going to look very similar to the one in Standard currently. Obviously, you can't run cards like Une that you might see in like a Standard constructed Ice list, but both Kurisames are legal that you might consider. A lot of good backups. Emina, Torgal. There's a lot of really good Ice backups. You lose the Armorer, but against the slower format. Clive and Jill are really strong. Sephiroth is still in the format, which is a really good removal spell. It's definitely, I think this will be the best deck in the format, most likely. The deck that might be the counter to it, or like the most common other deck, is going to be FF8 aggro. So between Adia, Squall, Selfie, Cypher, Rajin Fujin, and Ultimecia, you have this package of like 18 really good aggro forwards that are built around this like self-mill. Quistis as well will be played in this, where you, like if you go like Selfie, Squall, Quistis, you can dull freeze 3 characters, or Squall to play Selfie, play Quistis. So many different options for ways to really push this forward. You go like Adia for Selfie, for instance. You'll play these probably with the 3-cost red mage backups to force your opponent to discard. You might run Some a couple of like lightning backups to help you push forwards out of the way. You could even run like the Eden to clear the way for your stuff to push through and kill your opponent before the mono ice decks can actually settle. Mono Fire, I think, actually has a lot of relevance, and it's funny because a lot of the cards you might expect to see aren't really in this format. Again, there's no Amaterasu, for instance, but there's all those standard unit backups are pretty solid, and Montleonis is a hell of a payoff. So you can revive either like Caius or Terra in your 5 slot. In your 3 slot, I actually think you're going to be reviving Kefka a lot of the time, which is a really funny one, but the 3 cost and fire recently have not been amazing. It's like Kefka and Minwu. Minwu BE. But like Kefka is like a late game finisher, is really strong, right? Warriors of Darkness, I think, actually has a lot of potential with because there's no Amaterasu, you know your Noct is going to resolve. Emmett Selk can search for your Noct, and then you still have, because you're in Earth and Lightning, you can play the new Lightning as a combination of a removal spell and a finisher, and just a really difficult forward to deal with over and over again. So really, really cool deck that I've been brewing with. Soldiers is a aggro shell that you could consider. It's really just like a fire ice deck with Genesis, Angeal, Sephiroth, and Zac. I think would be really, really solid. You have the ability to remove forwards with Sephiroth. Zac's going to be pinging for 5k on a 3 CP LB, thanks to Angeal. Genesis makes all of them have your opponent discard cards or makes them all cheaper. It's a really strong package, actually, kind of almost out of nowhere. Crystals. Crystal good stuff is really strong. Lucio, Venat, the Emperor. Exenmil is actually a lot harder to deal with when in this format. Although maybe people run more summons because there's just less good cards in general. So maybe Exenmil will be less of a problem than I think he might be. Rahal generating 2 crystals and making all of your water forwards really strong. Jack Garland, for instance, making your opponent's forwards have to block and generating a lot of crystals. You are missing that like Glaciella or like the Lena that you would have in normal constructed, but daring your opponent to deal with a copy of the Emperor or they're going to lose the game is pretty good. Wind character and cast. Turns out Ace is still in the format, as is Adele, who can do a pretty decent Rosa impersonation. So this deck would require quite a bit of brewing, I think, to really make work. I think you might even want to play like Icewind, so you could play cards like the new Terra from Opus 24 to try to make your summons go a little further for a card like Belgiumine. But you do also have cards like Benedicta and Garuda for your Ace to always have the ability to clear the board early, and then Ace gives you that really strong finisher payload at the end. I think it'd be really, really solid. Odin and Behemoth. These are cards that I've experimented with in Constructed, but they end games like nobody's business. And there is one extra double attacking forward in the format, Inferion. And there are other card named Furions in the format, so if your goal is just to attack over and over again with a forward that does a bunch of damage, this is potentially a really cool way of doing it. Even through like one blocker, Furion can attack and then drain the one blocker your opponent has. And next thing you know, your opponent is just dead on the spot. Scions, I think, are actually very strong and relevant, but they would look very different from how they look in Constructed. There's no Ishtola, there's no Alize forward, so instead, you're probably running like 3 to 4. You're probably running like a bunch of Scion backups in like a Water Lightning Shell, and you're using Thancred and Astinian as Thancred's removal spell. Then when he dies, you revive a forward to 3 cost or less. In this format, probably something like maybe a copy of the Emperor or a Rahal, or like a Waka, for instance. You have Astinian to help get back your Thancred every turn, and then you have the Tataru to help you potentially draw a bunch of cards. Since you can run, there are 5 Scion backups: Tataru, Kryl, Urianger, Alize and Alphinaud. Yeah, you could just run 15 Scion backups and no other backups in a Water Lightning deck. Yeah, it's a brewer's paradise. I really do think there's a lot of viable decks that I haven't even mentioned here. FF13, I think it has a really interesting place with Hope and Sarah and Caius. I think that um, so many interesting things. Basically, like just go down the list of legends, and almost all of them you could find a way to make work in the format. So yeah, I'm really excited for it. I'm looking forward to seeing what other people do. I might bring a couple of extra decks with me if people are interested in playing or testing, or um, yeah, let me know what you think. If there's anything that I said that's exciting, honestly, check with your locals. See if people are interested in playing L3 and giving it just giving it a shot. I think it really is interesting. It could be a good way of getting new players in that don't have the ability to get cards from they don't have to get Lilia from Opus 6. They don't have to get Abendarasius from Opus 12. They don't have to get Refias from Opus 19 or Warriors of Light. They just have to get the cards that probably are already on the shelves anyway. So, yeah, thanks for watching. Hope you all enjoy it, and I'll see you all in the next one.